over the course of crypto's lifetime, we've seen projects come and go pretty well similar to corn on a field. They spawn, they grow, they die, and then 3 crappier projects tend to take their place. So it begs the question, right? Which altcoins are the ones that are going to prosper and grow and grow and grow? So that's kind of the question I want to answer in today's video, but more importantly, I want to assess where we currently are in this cycle, whether we can have, a possible retracement, or it's going to be just simply higher lows from here on out. So we're going to look at that, but also I want to give you and paint the picture essentially of what to do after 2025, because I saw a comment on a recent video where a subscriber said to me, he said, "Hey, Kyron, why are you talking about post, after 2025? Let's just have a bull run first." And I thought to myself, and no offense to him, of course, that's a very bad way to look at things. It's almost like saying, hey, I'm only going to worry about what I'm going to do for the next week of my life. Why not look into a year or 2 years? Any good entrepreneur will tell you to do that, because then you can work back on mini goals, right? Because if you just look at the very near future, you're not going to be concerned with the bigger picture, and you won't actually be able to create one. And so in this case, I want to create a bigger picture with you guys, and I want to explain that more at the end of this video. So with that said, leave a like and let's get into the video. So let's assess the Bitcoin market sentiment right now. What is the fear and greed index saying? Well, as you can see, it's a 73 on the scoreboard right now, and typically when we see a 70 or higher for a sustained period of time, which it looks like we are right now, we do see a retracement. It's just what happens, right? It's historical information. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and say that's going to definitely play out this time. History, of course, rhymes. It doesn't always repeat exactly. So again, just for all you people out there that have been holding through the bear market, just like myself, and the market started to pump up because of this Bitcoin spot ETF news, and you feel like you're a bit high and dry. You feel like, have I missed the boat? I'm going to buy higher, prices than what I could have been. I want to say just relax a little bit. Of course, it's a bad idea not being exposed to the market, but it's also a bad idea going all in on the market at not advantageous times. So I would always say, have some cash on the side ready to go, and that's what I've done here, of course. And again, we are still early. There's plenty of time to elapse. And if we're talking about where we are in the current cycle versus the last cycle, and this is the last cycle, we're actually about here right now, okay? We haven't even approached the Bitcoin halving yet. And the Bitcoin halving is essentially that siren that goes off that brings in everyone to crypto, right? It creates a scarcity for Bitcoin, and everyone's just like, oh my God, goes goo for gaga for Bitcoin, right? It's just typically what happens. And so just remember, we have a lot of time to elapse. And as you can see, anything like it did in the last cycle could happen. Now, this was the big C word, this was COVID. But of course, anything can cause a crash, all right? It is crypto. We've seen recently with some of the news that's coming out how fast and how little the news has to be to create a positive or negative price sentiment, okay, or action. And so if we kind of zoom out a little bit more here and have a look at where we currently are and what we can kind of expect into the coming cycle, we saw back in 2017, 2018 cycle from the time of the halving, approximately 1/3 the way through the cycle, all the way here, we had the top, and we 70x'd, right? We 70x over this period of time from the halving to the top, which was obviously quite low. We're looking at the global market cap over here. But if we fast forward to, again, the most recent cycle, we actually saw a diminishing return here. We saw an 11x, okay, from the halving to the top. But actually, it was kind of crazy how this actually occurred over the exact same period of time. Again, history typically doesn't repeat, it rhymes. But in this case, it damn well did repeat, right? So we can kind of expect a very similar thing. Here we currently are, and this is what it looks like if we map out where we are on the cycle. As I said, we're way back here in the equivalent right now. We have a long way to go before the halving occurs. And I would probably say, again, if we saw a diminishing return of 7x, we're likely to see, given the market cap at the halving is 1.5 trillion like it is now, about a 3.5 trillion global market cap, which is just over what it was before. I don't think so. I think we're going to break that cycle because of the amazing news, and I think we're going to fall somewhere between this, which is the 5 trillion, and the 10 trillion global market cap. I don't think we'll quite go as high as that, but I think we'll land somewhere in the middle. I bet a 7 global trillion market cap, right? And because we have more institutional and retail money with these Bitcoin and Ethereum spotty ETFs, it's going to provide more consumer confidence. More consumer confidence will also attract more institutional confidence, and we're going to see massive, massive growth. I truly do believe, right? So we do have that behind us. We do have the possibility. So again, pair this with how early we are right now, we are going to see some pretty good growth. But it still begs the question, right? What altcoins do we have to look for, and how do we know that there are good altcoins and not ones that are just going to end up dying off? Well, I'm not going to bore you with some crazy math and, online business model talk here. This is something that you should all fundamentally know, okay? It'll be very, very simple here, and let's keep it high level. this is essentially how the internet works, and this is going to apply to your cryptocurrencies in a second here. What essentially the internet is just this, right? It's a protocol that enabled what's called a multi-sided marketplace, essentially enabled infrastructure projects to come on. This is things like Wi-Fi, Ethernet, cellular networks, broadband, to be created, right? And these companies can create these sort of services and all the infrastructure. And then from the infrastructure, through the internet protocol, TCP and IP, we have things like email, the web, video, chat, and games that can be created. But it all stems from this the middle of the hourglass right here, which is the internet protocol itself, because it created what? A common ground for a multi-sided marketplace, and it doesn't constrain. There's no real rules here. It's just like build whatever the hell you want, all right? Now, this can be applied to our cryptocurrencies. In the example of Uniswap, right? Well, Uniswap is the middle ground here. It's the AMM DEX, and it is quite flexible. It is still somewhat inhibiting because you have to, of course, you can only create a contract that is on whatever Uniswap uses, and of course, you can only use two, essentially in this case, pools, right? You have to have one or the other, right? And of course, this does create a little bit of a so-called sticking point, but ultimately it's very free because at the bottom, the infrastructure, you have liquidity providers putting up the liquidity for the two pools. And then because of that, through the AMM DEX, through Uniswap, we have the end users and the traders, right? Who use the pools themselves, who use the DEX, okay? And that, of course, was a spawn of essentially the same protocol, the same instance as this. And we look towards a layer one, right, like Hedera. Well, validators, of course, through the hash graph, through the consensus, through the tech, then allow developers and then therefore the retail and institutional users to then use the project. And why is this important? Well, essentially, if we have a look in a second here, we'll use the example of Near Protocol. If we can assess the infrastructure, the validators, and the growth of the network alongside the technology, right, this will come later. This will come as a result of a very strong base. Now, again, I don't want to bore you guys with the technology and all the sort of the details with this, but essentially we're looking at something like this over here. Again, the layer zero, essentially the infrastructure, the validators, and the middle ground, which is essentially the hash graph or the technology, allows the layer 2 and layer 3 or smart contracts and the users and the interface to then develop and grow. So I want to introduce you guys to a channel partner, not a sponsor of this video, but rather a partnership that I've created to help all you aspiring traders. I know I have a large audience of you guys who either sometimes trade, casually trade, or again, want to aspire to be a full-time trader. Well, I've partnered with Bybit today because, as most of you should know, it is one of the most used exchanges out there and actually one of the most liquid as well. It's particularly suited for those who want to trade in any little nuanced way possible. I'm going to mention some of those nuances in a second here, but if you guys did want to create an account with Bybit, if you were impressed at all, please go on any of my descriptions, scroll down to the first link under the Want to Trade section, aspiring full-time traders, and click my referral link to access Bybit. Over there, once you do sign in, again, you will support the channel in that way as well, you have a whole host of options, right? One of the cool things is you have the spot market, but you also have leverage trading, which means you can, put in $1,000 and trade with 10,000. Of course, there are associated risks with that as well. But also you can margin trade, which means that you can put up your crypto assets, keep them locked up so you don't have to sell them, and then trade with their associated, equivalent, right? If you put $10,000 worth of XRP in, you can trade with $10,000. Of course, it's collateral. So if you lose it, you lose it. But of course, that allows you to be more flexible. If you make it back, of course, you keep the asset. It's just very, very simple as that. So that's a really cool benefit. But also they do have multiple different ways you can trade with derivatives. They have options, they have futures. It just expands, right? But some really cool options that I think you guys need to check out here is under the tools section, you can use Trade GPT to trade as a GPT or an AI for you. Really cool is if that's kind of scary to you, and I get a lot of people that's kind of like, oh, I don't want to do that. Well, it allows you to just DCA as well. You can literally make this bot just DCA for you. It's kind of nutty in a way. Also, you can copy trade as well. So you can copy trade some of the top traders in the spot realm. So, when they buy and sell, you just copy that. Pretty cool, pretty simple. But what I quite like about this is it also has access to futures contracts as well, something other exchanges can't say, which is awesome. So with that said, guys, if you are interested in Bybit, please go ahead and support the channel. Use my link down below. And of course, with that all said, let's get straight back into the video. We don't have a look at what many people might think, right? You see time and time again crypto influencers, and the common knowledge is have a look at the metrics first. And when I say metrics, have a look at this, the layer 3 and layer 2, when in reality, we should be doing this in stages. We should be having a look at this first, because crypto has a tendency of what? Blowing up projects that don't actually have any longevity because they don't have any infrastructure. They don't have this sorted out first. And this is important because we see time and time, look at Shiba Inu, look at all these meme coins, look at a lot of these layer 1 networks that shot up in the last bull run that have died now, okay? I can name a few, I don't want to single them out. And that's because they have this popping off temporarily, right? They might have high transaction volume, they might have high amount of users, they might have, all these new accounts being created, but ultimately they die off because there's no one able to develop on the project. There really is no technical use because they either have bad tech or they don't have any sound infrastructure. So we assess that first. And so let me just kind of explain this again, and we'll again use an example with Near Protocol here in a minute. Healthy and growing infrastructure means more network functionality, which is what we look for that essentially in the analogy, right? The healthy corn that's going to prosper in the future, not just temporarily in this bull run. So 1, does the tech enable a multi-sided marketplace? Does it enable this to even happen? It's very important. If it doesn't enable this, I'm sorry, but if it's a promise, right? If it's like, hey, we have this tech, it just basically works, you can do your transfers, or in Uniswap's case, like it might be something very basic, right? And there really is no benefit on the other side. There is no there's no multi-sided marketplace. Well, unfortunately, it's not going to be a good long-term hold. And number 2, is the infrastructure growing? Is the bottom layer growing? And you can kind of group in the middle section as well, the project. We're looking for sustained growth rather than superficial/meme growth. Again, superficial and meme growth can always just come from the very top. You can imagine back to the internet, right? In this case, if we just kind of get rid of this for a second here, imagine if there was a token for the internet, right? There was a token that was created for it. Imagine if people were buying it up and saying, oh yeah, there's going to be games coming soon and all this sort of stuff, and everyone's buying the token. But in reality, nothing was being built on the internet for this to even happen in the first place. You see what I'm sort of saying here? And this makes a lot of sense. You just have to look at it through the right lens. And so we come to a project like Near Protocol. How do we assess this? Well, first of all, guys, we have to go and have a look at the foundations. Have a look at the full-time developers. Is it even being developed, all right? There's a few different sort of processes I could explain in this case, but I wanted to make this video nice and easy for everyone to understand. And the reason why we assess developers, and it doesn't make much sense, right? You just said developers come before from, there being an infrastructure. Well, we're looking at this case for full-time developers. Developers actually building the network itself, building that middle, the center of the hourglass, not smart contract developers, not third-party developers. We're looking for actual, in this case, Near Protocol devs. And yes, it's 104 and it has been on the massive dip since the bull run. This typically happens, right? Because they have to cut costs. They don't have the money to pay developers anymore, so they have to cut costs. But we'll have a look in a second here on the one year mark, that yes, it is now increasing, which is good to see, right? They are building, right? So number 1, of course, we have to assess, actual developers. In this case, it is growing. We can see the commits is growing as well, which is very important, meaning that they are making code changes. They are upgrading the technology. And again, it is now starting to be on the up and up for the actual project itself, right? The developers itself. But in addition to that, of course, what is the infrastructure? Well, the infrastructure spawns from the security of the network, which of course comes from the technology, but also comes from the validators themselves. And this will require you to dig a little bit into the technology, so I'm not going to bore you with that, because you do have to know, hey, like Near Protocol, they're only capping this right now at approximately 200 validators. They're only capping that. So only 200 concurrent can be active, and they will, as time progresses, unlock that exponentially. You can just have how many you want. And so this will come, but it's good to know that roadmap upgrade will eventually come, which actually coincidentally is coming in the next couple of years for Near Protocol. So again, in this case, you can have a look at the validator list on their Explorer page and just have a look how many are validating, and then scroll down and have a look. As you can see here, there are like 400, 500 ready to go. And this will, of course, be unlocked. I might even look to become one myself in the near future, no pun intended, when they do unlock this for more people. Obviously, to be validating yourself right now, that's quite expensive, right? So this is something to assess, okay? Because essentially, again, what we're looking at in this case is this, right? We're having a look at the validators and, of course, the tech. Now, I know Near's tech pretty well. I made a full video on this already, so I understand these things are coming and it will be able to sustain a lot of infrastructure again, validators, right? And so of course we've like up the value stack here, but what comes next? What's the sort of result of this? Well, this is when we can go and have a look at the unique addresses. How many addresses are being created? As you can see, there's like 195,000 being created every single day, and it's literally going to be exponential here very, very soon. And we also pair this, not with the fees, with the active daily users. So is there actually people using this daily, right? There's a difference between people creating an account and difference between that and people actually using, interacting with, well, the interface, right? Interacting with the developments from the developers, right? The smart contracts. So we can kind of get a glimpse into this just from here, okay? Because if you don't have any infrastructure, well, there's really not much to, smart contracts or applications to interact with. So this won't look as pretty and good. So we assess this, as you see, Near Protocol is just growing exponentially right now, which is very important as well. And we can also kind of get a pretty good idea of this with the fees. Is there a lot of fees from transactions being created? Now, as you can see with Near Protocol, it is also increasing quite rapidly here. So this is a very important thing to also assess as well. These three things in tandem, there is a whole heap more, like over here, for example, the TVL. We want to make sure the TVL is quite high. Near Protocols isn't really that high, but not only that, but is the TVL diversified amongst many projects? There's no point in having one DEX or one DeFi project that has 100% of the TVL, because obviously there's one protocol, it's not very diverse. So it is a pretty good spread over here on Near Protocol, which is good to see. So all in all, I think Near Protocol is one of those projects you can confidently look at and saying, yes, they are building for the long term. Okay, we can only really see with the course of time and how it performs in this bull run, but I do think, again, based on some of these very basic metrics, that yes, it's going to have a very prosperous future. If it was continuously going down from the last cycle and still going down now, what's that saying, right? Especially if the TVL was low, there wasn't many ecosystem projects, if the fees were crap, and if the active wallets were quite low as well. That's the concerning sign to see, because again, maybe there is no developments on the project itself. So that's very important to look at. But again, we have to have a lens into what comes after the bull run, okay? And I had a conversation with my dad, like literally last night. I said to him, he's really into real estate. And I said to him, like, look, I want to own, enough properties after this bull run to be able to retire myself. Effectively, don't have to worry about a single, worrying about working again. I can just make enough money passively from the properties. Of course, having to own them outright is important, okay? And so we were like kind of going back and forth on property prices. Now, this is for Australia, of course, and you want to do this for your own region, if this was you in your case. And we're kind of like looking, so where, of course, is going to be the areas of the most capital appreciation over time, the property being worth more, and where it also has the most rental yield, because that's what's going to be bringing me in the money. So these are things to assess, but ultimately, and very broadly speaking, want to make sure that where you're buying, of course, isn't the most expensive, but also will offer you the most passive income. Because for me, I'm personally looking here to go, guys, 90% into real estate after the cycle and 10% of my portfolio back into crypto, maybe even 5%. And so it got me thinking, how many properties do I have to own? And of course, where I'm buying will depend on how much money I'm going to have to fork out to buy these properties. I want to buy them outright. That's the whole premise. You have to own them outright. And so we have to, of course, take a few things into consideration here. What are the ongoing expenses? In this case, things like rates, insurance, pest control, water rates, things like this that will go into it as well. Let's just kind of safely say $8,000 per property per year in this case. And then you have to understand, well, how much on average right now at least is the average rental income. Now, this of course will change depending on where you buy, what state and what area. So you want to, of course, narrow into that. But broadly speaking, for the premise of this video, let's say 600 a week. Well, of course, if we do 600 times 3, work that out on a weekly basis. This is 3 properties, by the way. Multiply that by 4 for a month and multiply that by 12. That comes to about $86,400 revenue minus the expenses of $8,000 per property per year. We get about $62,000 income. Now, of course, I'm not going to be someone living lavishly. I want to obviously live within my means, but I think $62,000 a year is not enough for me. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I need 4 or 5 properties, right? So then I became to think about it, like, what am I kind of looking at here for how much money I need to make out of the bull run, right? And so I was like, boom. Okay, I might need $3 to $4 million to get the properties plus the 5% for crypto that I might want to reinvest into in 2026. So these are the sort of things you have to assess yourself, okay? And I'm saying your goals might be completely different, might be very similar. I don't know. You have to look at this. Don't be one of them people that looks only towards what we're going to do the next week or next month or next couple of years. Look at what you're actually trying to achieve from crypto. Then you can work out, I need a 20, 30, I need a 100x for God's sake. You know what I'm saying? So please do this. assess this. Either way, we're very early right now, guys. A lot of upside to still come. So with that said, if you've made it this far, drop a like on the video. Thank you so much for watching the whole way through, and I will look forward to seeing you all on the next one. Take care. Bye.